Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Maternal Minds. This is a series where I chat with different women about their experiences with mental health conditions and how it intersects with their parenting experience. So today I have Eve Canavan on here to talk with me, and she works with the Perinatal Mental Health Partnership. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited because we've developed quite a teeny little Instagram friendship over the past few months, which has been really fun for me.
Yeah, I agree. It's been very nice connecting and stuff. It's very fun.
Yeah.
It's so nice. It's so nice to be talking eventually.
So I found out who you were through Catherine Benfield, and she pointed me into your direction because she said that you do a lot of maternal mental health awareness, and you had actually developed Maternal Mental Health Awareness Week. Is that true?
Yeah,
Can you tell me
that's
about
right.
that?
So in 2014, I kind of joined Twitter, and I started to connect with other women who'd experienced maternal mental illness like I had after I'd given birth to my son. And I kind of wanted to use my experience in some way for something, for some kind of good, to try and make out of the worst experience of my life into something positive. So I connected with a group of other women just like us, Windsor, who wanted to use their experience as well. And we decided to develop an awareness week for maternal mental illness. And we kind of kicked around ideas for a couple of years, not really knowing how to do it. We didn't have any money. It wasn't anything like anything we'd done before. We weren't kind of comms professionals or anything. And we in 2017 we launched a Perinatal Mental Health Partnership. There's just a small group of us, and we ran with the first UK Maternal Mental Health Awareness Week. We go in line with World Maternal Mental Health Day, so we run during that, and the same week as the US campaign as well. So that fits together nicely. So we've just had our 4th year. So in 2021 it will be our 5th year, and I think using the word success is kind of an unusual one to talk about when you're talking about a campaign which is trying to help women who are going through mental illness at their most vulnerable time. But I think we would measure success by the fact that we get such good feedback from women about the fact that we are giving them real tools and practical things to do and arming them with knowledge so that they're aware that not only do they need help, but they deserve it. And I think that is why, I mean, how it's come on in leaps and bounds. This year we had the Duchess of Cambridge support the Awareness Week and its launch, and to go from this tiny little idea that we had to that and know that it's going out to millions of women across the world actually is incredible.
Yeah, that's an amazing accomplishment, especially coming from such a dark place.
Oh
And
yeah,
also,
I think.
oh no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think, I don't know, some people I think experience an illness and you kind of think, I want to put it into the box and for it to go away, and that's completely okay. And I've met people who have been unwell like me, who have essentially moved on and don't wish to talk about it anymore and go on with their life, and that's okay. Me, I kind of feel like I'm in a different place now where I don't talk about my own personal experience that much anymore for no real reason, just that there are other women who have maybe more recent things, who've accessed more recent healthcare, who can kind of give a more kind of insight into how they're treated now. But I can definitely use my insight, and I will never forget, for all of the good things that have come out of what happened to me, my biggest wish, Andrew, is that I'd never been unwell. So I think that is still at the crux of everything. I'm recovered, we're doing lots of good things, but I so wish that had never happened to me, because it was the hardest thing that had ever happened to me. At some points I thought I wouldn't emerge from it. As I say, it's my birthday tomorrow, and at some points I didn't ever think I'd see it. So I think a very good thing has come from it, and I'm very proud of that, actually.
So, yeah, I mean, I would be really proud too. I feel like so many women can benefit, and especially when you start off with just a few women, right, without a lot of background in mental health advocacy and creating these large campaigns. It's a super huge deal. Can you tell me more about the tools that you offer the women and the support system that you've been able to create for them?
Yeah, of course. So one of the things that we really talk about here during the Awareness Week, which we focus on every year, is the importance of safe peer support. And so I've had conversations with Catherine, about this previously. As I was getting better, I wanted to kind of see if I could use my experience to help other women, and was going to charities to say, I'd like to be a peer supporter. What I realise now to be a peer supporter is, you really have to be in a very good place in your recovery in order to take that role on. And then, I've got a peer supervisor who I can talk to if there's any issues with women I'm suffering, working with. And so during the Awareness Week, we kind of split the week into 5 days of themes, and one of them is around accessing safe peer support, where you can go to get it. And even so, there's about 11 of us in the Perinatal Mental Health Partnership, and a number of us have created local charities across the country. So we've got Bluebell, Smile Group, and Raindrops to Rainbows. And so in those areas, they are running support groups for women, and we kind of use their knowledge to kind of create some information to women about when they're accessing, whether it's in-person support, outside of COVID times, or virtual support, how they can access that safely, and ensure that the support they're getting, they're aware that it's not what to do in a crisis, they're not to go for that in a crisis. I think this is where we do a lot of stuff around how to talk to a healthcare professional about your symptoms, and that's where I do some work with Catherine as well, because one of the things we really focus on is women who are frightened of talking about their intrusive thoughts with a healthcare professional and how they can raise it in conversation. And one of the people that are in the partnership is a GP, a doctor called Dr. Stephanie DiGiorgio, who's a dear friend of mine. She's on Twitter and she's unbelievable if you're on Twitter. She's such a funny lady, but she's also a perinatal lead here in the UK. And she's a mother who experienced maternal mental illness with her 2 children. And she did a Facebook Live for us a couple of years ago, telling people how to approach their doctor about their symptoms, how to sit down and say it. And she talks very openly about her own intrusive thoughts around her daughter. And I think for people to see that, to see a woman speaking so openly about it, giving advice on how to talk to a doctor, and also her being a doctor themselves, it's almost a tool that women can show to their doctor to say, I'm telling you that I've got these weird thoughts about knives or harm or hurting, and I'm really upset about it, and I've been scared to tell you, but here's this doctor talking about it as well. So it's almost as if we're giving support to women about how to arm themselves with tools to make sure that they're able to talk about what happened to them and to talk about why they need help. But also we get feedback from healthcare professionals that the things that we do like that are almost used as training tools, so they can sit down and watch that actually. So when a woman comes into them to say, I've had these thoughts about harm, that they don't go, oh, what do you mean? They can say, actually, this isn't my area. I don't know much about it. And that's what women want them to say. They want them to be open about it. But I've read such and such. I watched a half an hour video on Facebook that's given me some insight into what we do. And then we focus a lot on recovery stories. We share blogs and vlogs of women who've experienced maternal mental illness. We try to kind of get them from via charities. We know the women who are sharing are in a good place to do it. And so it's mainly giving them these tools. And we've done these things. We've done kind of a sessions on emotional freedom technique and how to do that. We did one this year on singing and music therapy and art therapy, which was so popular. It was unbelievably popular. It's had thousands of views. And we've started to do a lot of stuff around how we can support mums in the Jewish community, how we can support mums in the South Asian community, how can we support Black mums, and making sure that we're bringing in organisations to represent those women, and their voice is being heard, not just us kind of delivering a message, but putting them at the forefront of the conversation and saying, you need to listen to this. And I think there's been some huge, that we've had some desperately sad statistics here in the UK about, maternal death, and also, maternal death and Black mums, which we have to do better about. And so we've started to work with them over the last 3 years. And I think that is extremely important for us. And I think it's something we'll be focusing on very heavily going forward. We have really great links with things like the Asian Mums Network and the Motherhood Group, who support Black mums here in the UK. And there's a Jewish charity just starting in October coming up who we're supporting as well and championing as well. So trying to make sure that we're not missing out any mum, which I think the feedback we've had from women who would kind of go out to mainstream media or read things on the internet or try and look at social media, they say, I can't find anything that represents me. So we're trying to constantly learn about what we can do better in the campaign, and then try and make sure we're delivering things for all women.
So how did you connect with all of these different types of organizations, did you do personal reach outs, or were they looking for collaborations as well?
Both, but initially personal reach out. When we formed the Perinatal Mental Health Partnership, we were just a group of like women who'd been unwell. We didn't know what we'd do with it or who would listen to us. But there's an umbrella organisation in the UK called the Maternal Mental Health Alliance, which is kind of an overarching organisation that does some campaigning for better services for women with maternal mental illness. And there's lots of charities who are part of that. And we managed to get ourselves onto that. And while I was there, I met a wonderful midwife who did some work with women who'd experienced FGM. And I kind of got talking to her about women from certain communities, that we could connect with. I started looking on the internet around things about how can we be culturally sensitive to some mums, and making sure that we're kind of getting our messaging right. So I contacted the Asian Mums Network, who are unbelievable, and so grateful to be contacted and saying we feel like our voices haven't been picked up or listened to. Reaching out to them. And I think what's so great now is that they're doing such brilliant work that has to be listened to, and organisations now are kind of going to them. So when organisations want some research done to see how we can better support these mums, they're going out to these organisations directly. But the personal approach, I think there's nothing better than connecting and talking about your own experience, but then also me realising, I have what I feel was a personal devastating experience, but also, some women who've experienced what I have lead a totally different family life, cultural life, and what works for me might not be the same for them. And we need to listen to that, and then make sure we're actually listening to these organisations and reaching out. A lot of people have said to me, how do you get out to these organisations? How do you speak to them? Can you give us some tips? And I was like, you just reach out. It's like how we started talking, like, hi, you seem really funny. And I did a supporting mum series on Instagram now, and lots of people contact me to say, oh, I'd be really interested in doing something with you, Eve. And then you work out whether it's going to be the right fit for that time, and whether it's the kind of thing we should be looking at that time. But I think the personal approach, and one of the things I think, Windsor, that has come through over the last 4 years was that finally people are listening to us as experts by experience. We have been through this, and kind of it seems like a grand title, but it's absolutely essential that we realize we are experts by experience. This has happened to us. It shouldn't have happened to us. We didn't want it to happen to us, but it has, and we've put ourselves in a position that we want to use it in some way. We absolutely should be asked by healthcare professionals who formulate guidelines and things what we think about it. And we've got this thing in the UK called the Perinatal Mental Health Toolkit, which is a toolkit of clinical resources that's been developed for doctors. So if someone does go into the surgery to say, I'm feeling like I don't love my baby, I'm crying all day, I can't eat, I can't leave the house, I'm scared of everything, that actually they might go, oh, I don't know what you're talking about, but they can actually go to this thing that's on Google that anyone can access. And me and a number of other women reviewed it as experts by experience. So even though it's being used by doctors, we were asked to review it and see what we thought of it before it was released, which was incredibly important, I think, to say that there's some kind of like joined up correspondence and communications. But I always think the personal touch and sharing why you're doing what you do, because we've been there, we know how the women feel, and we want to make sure that their voices were heard when ours weren't.
Yeah, that's so important, I feel like, because especially sometimes we'll be reading things that like symptom lists or checklists of what these disorders look like, when that's like, it could be really similar, it could be not similar at all to what you're experiencing, because each person their symptoms will show up slightly different, and you kind of want to make sure that everyone is seen, and there's like different variations of each illness. Within your group, the Perinatal Mental Health Partnership, I know that you have experienced postpartum psychosis. Do the other women, have you experienced a range of postpartum mood disorders?
Oh, yeah. So I had postpartum psychosis, and I was treated in a psychiatric mother and baby unit. Catherine had postpartum psychosis and was in another mother and baby unit. Beth had a range of different symptoms and was treated in a mother and baby unit and then a private facility. Steph, who runs Raindrops to Rainbows, had postnatal depression after each of her children, and she set up a charity. Ruth had postnatal depression, and then Natalie and Ruth did as well from the other charity. And then Dr. Stephanie had PMD, postpartum depression with intrusive thoughts. And we have Dr. Andy, we have a man in the partnership who looks at sleep in his day work, looks at perinatal stuff in his day work. His personal focus is on fathers. We do share stuff on fathers, but kind of our main aim is maternal mental illness, but we do share stuff on fathers. But it's brilliant to have Andy on board, because I think, he talks about as a family member, but also kind of from the research side of things, from the academic side of things as well, so we've got that kind of thrown in with us as well. But yeah, so we've all experienced maternal and mental illness in some way, with varying treatments, so a number of us were inpatients in psychiatric units like myself, and others were treated at home. And saying we've all used our experience differently. So I'm an advocate and speak out like this, and I coordinate the week, whereas Steph and Ruth and Nat and the other Ruth run their local charities, and then Beth is a huge advocate who does work for Postpartum Support International. So yeah, we've all struggled in some way, and then have all kind of come together.
Can you share about your experience with postpartum psychosis?
Yeah, of course. And I still always say yeah, because when I had Joe, I'd never heard of it, even though I'd been to, like, in the UK, we have these really expensive antenatal classes that cost like $600. And, they taught me all kinds of things like, don't have a hot drink near the baby, or don't do this, or and I was like, if someone had just said to me, actually, you can have a baby and this could happen, it would have, even if they'd said that one line to me, it would have empowered me in some way to understand that something wrong, was happening to me. But yeah, so I was pregnant with Joe. I'd had a number of failed pregnancies. I've got 2 wombs, so I've got a really rare womb disorder, and one of them is very, very small, and Joe was growing in the very small womb. And I was told, maybe I'll have a stillbirth, or that I'd have to have a cesarean quite early after 30 weeks, because he'll grow out of room to grow. So I was kind of being seen by a consultant every week. And actually he got to 38 weeks, and I had a beautiful planned cesarean, because I can't give birth vaginally because it's all like a bit squashed up around there. Yeah. And my gynecologist, who'd seen me all the way through, delivered Joe, and it was all beautiful, and Dolly Parton was playing in the band, and it was all amazing, and then he came out, and I was feeding him, and it was all gorgeous. There were like birds singing around my head and whatever. And then my mum walked in, so this is about 40 minutes after I'd had him. She was allowed into the postnatal ward to see me, and the first thing she said, and I remember it so vividly, is that I thought she'd come in going, oh, give me the baby. But she said, Evelyn, what's wrong with your face? And she said to John, my partner, she looks glazed over, is she okay? And the nurse said, oh, she's just come out of a C-section, she's been heavily medicated. I was still completely numb, so she said, it's major surgery, she's gonna feel a bit kind of knocked around. And my mum said, her face doesn't seem quite right. And I remember that so vividly. And
so your mom knew right away.
She knew straight away something wasn't right. And if she was here now, she would say, I knew the moment I walked in something wasn't right with our Evelyn. She says it now when we talk. And I remember when she said it, I kind of looked behind her. I gave birth in a very old hospital in East London, and there were like bars on the window, like from like Victorian times. And I can remember having this flashing thought of how would I climb out of that window if I wanted to escape. It was very quick. And I was a bit like, oh, that's a bit okay, it's a bit unusual. But basically, I did the next 3 days. I stayed in the hospital for 3 days after my C-section, and I just deteriorated. First of all, I felt really, really, really hot, and I kept saying to the nurses, it's boiling in here, can you turn the heating down? And they were like, no, it's completely fine. And then Joe needed his nappy changed in the middle of the first night. He did his first poo, and I couldn't find the nappies. And the nurse said I had to find my own nappy, that the hospital wouldn't give me any. And I just remember feeling very, very, very distressed about this, and not knowing where anything was, but kind of to the point where I felt like my head was going to explode. And as we left hospital on the 3rd day, as the outside air hit me, and I kind of had my hospital stockings on and all this kind of stuff, as the air hit me, I just remember thinking, I'm terrified. I felt like a massive fear of the outside that I'd never felt before. And we got into my sister's car to drive us home, and I said to John, I feel like there's loads of people surrounding the car and that the car's moving. And he was like, oh, it had tinted windows. He was like, no, it's a busy high street, but there's no one around the car. And I then developed, my ears went all muffly, and I developed tunnel vision, like I could see at the end of here. And I said to John, he was like, are you okay? And of course I said, yeah, I'm fine. And I realised I wasn't. And for the whole of the hour-long journey home, it was just incredibly muffled. And of course, then when we got home over the next, 5 weeks, I started experiencing, I kept saying to John, I felt very trapped in things. I kept wanting windows to be opened in the house, and that I felt like I couldn't breathe. We went outside for trying to go for a daily walk, and I said that I felt like the houses were moving in and out, and that the air was making me feel trapped. And I remember saying to John, if only I could climb up to the clouds and cut through them, maybe I could breathe. And then I thought I was floating in the corner of a room, and then I thought
Can I pause you right there? Can I just pause and say, when you say you felt like the houses were moving, did it like look to you like the houses were moving, or were you just like worried that they might be?
No, they looked like they were moving. I knew they weren't really, but I could see them, if that makes sense. I can see it now, and I think of it. They were moving like in and out like this. And I said to John, you have to call an ambulance. You have to call an ambulance. I'm not well. You have to call an ambulance right now. And I had a massive panic attack. And I then started to say, I feel trapped by the baby. And I think the biggest symptom that I had was the fact that I suddenly realised this baby was here forever. And I always say this time, but I had this realisation that I couldn't just say, I don't like the baby now, the baby has to go away. Like if I don't like my job anymore, I'll apply for a new job, and it might take some time, but I'll definitely get one eventually. Or we need to move out of this flat. We might not ever be able to sell it, but we will eventually. I suddenly realised I couldn't do that with a baby. And I can't describe to you the fear that used to come into me when that thought would enter me. I would be literally pinned to the bed, and I'd wake up every day terrified of leaving the bed. And I remember I used to wake up in the bed that's here, and I'd open my eyes and I'd say to John, I can't face another day. I just can't face another day feeling this terrified. I couldn't be in the same room with Joe on my own. I wouldn't hold him on my own. I was really scared of him, like completely and utterly terrified of him. And I was just consumed by the fact that I'd made a terrible, terrible, terrible mistake that I wasn't able to change. And, poor John, I mean, he called every doctor, every midwife. In the UK, we have health visitors, like family nurses who come around after the baby. I remember he spoke to her, and she just kept saying, oh, she hasn't slept because she's exclusively breastfeeding. She's never getting any sleep. It'll be sleep deprivation. One family nurse said, oh, I haven't seen anything like this before, but I'm sure it will get better. One doctor asked me if I'd had visions of flushing down the toilet. And when I said, I was like, no, she was like, oh, that's okay then. And of course, now I realise that these are not
a really specific question to ask.
No. And I realise now she might have had a mum in front of her before who's had that kind of thought. So maybe she thought she was being helpful by asking me, but it also wasn't taking on board what I was saying overall, And I was like, no. And because I said no, she kind of just thought I was, again, a bit sleep deprived. And she told me to have a rest, and she told me to buy a cake. And maybe she was like, go and buy yourself some new mascara and kind of doll your face up. And John was saying, no, this is completely and utterly ludicrous. But this went on and on and on. And when Jo was about 5 weeks old, John just said, he called the family nurse and said, she's so unwell, we don't know what to do with her. And the family nurse said, I've never seen anyone as ill as Eve. I've never seen this before. And so John packed us off to his parents, kind of 200 miles away, so he could get some help. And when we were there that night, I had a massive breakdown, and saw a doctor in the middle of the night, woke up the next day. I've got visions of like crawling around on his parents' bed. My mouth was bleeding because I've been screaming so much. And John kind of turned up at hospital with me and just said she needs to be assessed now, because she's really, really unwell. And I was completely rejecting Jo at that point. And that's when I got admitted to the psych unit.
I feel like it's unbelievable to me that you had so many postnatal visits, but nobody recognized your symptoms.
Oh, Windsor. So I go to these perinatal conferences now, my professional role, you know, and I see, actually, I've seen some healthcare professionals there who actually saw me when I was ill. When I stand up, I had one particular doctor go, "I remember you," and I said, you know, I was really, really, really poorly. I mean, really poorly. You know, my mum was she just couldn't. When she saw me, she was just like, she couldn't believe how ill I was. You know, and a couple of them have said to me they didn't know what to do with me. You know, they'd been taught at like medical school like some very basic symptoms of PND. And I remember when John had taken me to the emergency room one night, there was one doctor there who I was like, I really think I've got this psychosis thing. I'd been Googling it. And he said, no, that's no. We think this is probably postnatal depression, and it passes after 12 weeks. And me kind of going, I don't know. And then John saying to one doctor, I've been reading on the internet. I really think she needs to go into one of these mother and baby units. So John and me doing all this kind of stuff. How do we get her into one? And she needs to see a perinatal psychiatrist. And there was one particular doctor who said, there's no such thing as them, dear. And I remember that very clearly. And of course,
Is what?
a perinatal psychiatrist.
How many years ago was this? I'm sure there was one.
I was like, what the? Of course there are. You know, so I genuinely think now, I mean, I you know, talk to the Institute of Health Visiting here. A lot of my videos are used to train people. You know, that's why I keep talking about it, because I think when I'm on mums groups on Facebook, you know, I'm on so many like breastfeeding groups and things, and when after Joe was born, I still see this happening. You know, that a couple of times a week I'll see someone say, you know, the nurse said, you know, that I'm having these weird visions. They're only coming twice a week, and the nurse says it's because I'm not getting enough sleep. And you know, and I don't want to go on antidepressants. They say that's only for really poorly people. I genuinely think they hadn't seen someone as ill as me, and they didn't know it's me. And what I realise now is, so I went into a mother and baby unit 200 miles away from where we live. Now, there aren't a lot of them in the UK. I think there's about 15 or 17 of them. We've had a few more commissioned, and they've only got about 6 beds each. But there's actually one quite near where I live that was there when I was ill. But when John had said, we need to get into one of these places, are there any around here? People were like, no. And of course, we realise now that there was. And even when I was discharged and we came back to London when Joe was about 4 months old, I was supposed to kind of get like outpatient care, go and see a psychiatric team once a week here. And they just said they didn't know how to deal with a woman who'd had these kind of postpartum issues. So every week I had to travel 200 miles with Joe strapped on me on a train to go and see the psychiatrist at the psychiatric unit 200 miles away for a year, see how I was. Because I just think, like, whereas I think people were scared, I think people didn't know what to do. And when John said, I'm going to take her to my parents, I think for them they were a bit like, okay, great, you take her to your parents and off you go.
Yeah.
That's appalling. But things are a lot better. But in my advocacy work and in my peer support role, we see this. We see this a fair amount is still happening.
So is it because there's a misconception about what postpartum psychosis actually looks like versus how it's experienced by the sufferer? Like, how could they not know what you were going through?
Yeah, I think so. A few years ago, we have like a soap opera here in the UK called EastEnders, and they based the storyline partly on my experience and also of Catherine, who's in the partnership. And we worked very heavily with them for 18 months on the storyline to make sure they got it right. And what was really interesting is that on Twitter and places, there was an awful lot of healthcare professionals really damning the episode, saying this isn't true. Because the character was bipolar. So if you're bipolar, you're supposed to be looked at, you know, and kind of considered that you could develop postpartum psychosis. Like, I don't have bipolar, so it was never raised to me at all. And so a lot of people were saying, that character's got bipolar. It was raised by her doctor, her consultant, her gynecologist, you know, her obstetrician, that postpartum psychosis, you know, could happen. and she would have been prepped for it. And so all these healthcare professionals were damning. But what was then interesting was the women like me who were actually saying, oh, hi, I'm a woman who had bipolar who developed PP. It was never talked about. I'd never heard about this. We had reams and reams of women saying, actually, this experience might have been based on me, even Catherine, but we so heavily identify with it. So it was as if there was this kind of like this meeting of kind of minds about what was real and what wasn't. And I think also as well, one of the things when I was talking to some healthcare professionals, and I've put this on Insta, when I said, oh, EastEnders are going to be covering Stacey's story, basing it on kind of me and Catherine, a healthcare professional friend of mine said, I'm not friend of someone I knew on Twitter, said, oh, Eve, you must please, I can't bear it if Stacey kills her baby. And that's not going to happen, is it? And I said, well, no, why would that happen? And I was like, I didn't kill my baby. And they said, well, women do. And I said, well, we are, of course, as advocates, we're of course aware of, these things happen, and this is what we work. So women don't, end their own lives, or, take the lives of, of other people. We are aware of devastating circumstances where these have happened, where they haven't got the care they've wanted, they've deserved. But I was like, there is this the misconception that as soon as you have postpartum psychosis, that you're going to kill your baby or something. And I think because maybe I wasn't presenting like that, people are a bit like, oh, well, we don't have to do anything about it, because that is what I get quite often, and when I talk about my extreme symptoms, people go, oh, goodness. But I think for some, it was definitely maybe because I wasn't presenting as that, they were kind of a bit like, oh, okay. But I just think there's a whole lack of information around it. I think, it's not as rare as people think.
They say that it's like 1 out of every 1,000 or 2,000. What is it?
Yeah, exactly that figure. 1 in every. Some places say 1 in every 500, but most say 1 in every 1,000 to 2,000. And of course, sometimes women message me to say, I actually had some hallucinations and I was really ill. I was treated for maternal OCD, maybe. Now I start to wonder, was it, psychosis and kind of things. And of course, we can't diagnose that. But I just think, I don't think people are necessarily missing my symptoms, because, we've got videos and photographs of myself at that time, and I'm so ill, Windsor. I'm so ill. I'm like a robot. I just don't think what to do with me. And the particular family nurse who was seeing, admitted it that day, and she said, we just don't know what to do with you. Thank God we had the resources and the finances to be able to go away, because, and that's one of the reasons that I do what I do now. Not everyone is in that position. John was able to work from home for 3 months and take special paid leave and all this kind of business. That other people aren't in that position. So we think we're in a difficult position. There are women and families going through, far more difficult circumstances. But yeah, I just think that people weren't missing what was wrong with me. I just think they were acting within the boxes that they knew, and they didn't know what to do outside of those boxes.
Mm-hmm. So what treatment plan finally worked for you?
So I'd been put on a low dose of an antidepressant when Joe was about 2 weeks old. And so when I was hospitalised, he was 6 weeks. And so they took me off that one immediately, and they put me on an old style antidepressant, which I still get doctors now going, why are you on this? And I'm like, because it works, because it works for me. Because I was in a hospital environment, I was able to put onto a high dose almost immediately. Because I was in a safe environment.
So that they can monitor your behavior. And
that's one of the things I talk about, sometimes on social media, when people say, can I have opinions on medications and what doses are. I think my experience has really showed me, actually, I'm a huge advocate for medication personally, but that you must work with your care provider about, how you go up, down, take new ones, this, that, and the other. So I was on antipsychotics and antidepressants, and I think I was on antipsychotics for about a month as a regular kind of thing, and then I took them when I needed them. And I was taking, so I had like medication 3 times a day. I had cognitive behavioural therapy, and I had exposure therapy. And I've talked about this with Catherine Benfield, actually. So when I left the mother and baby unit and I was on home leave, I had to start off doing very tiny things, such as taking Joe literally 5 seconds down the road and then back again, then 10 seconds, then to the post office, then out the end by the shops, and then I remember I had to get on a bus with him, and that just, I like the fear of going on a bus with him. And then I had to spend an afternoon in the house on my own with him, all to build me up to kind of feeling comfortable with him. And then actually a couple of years after I was unwell, I had EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, where you follow a flashing light, you know, to kind of get yourself back to a traumatic memory, which might still be making you feel a bit weird. And I realised that I was left with some residual things from psychosis. So even though I was better, I was experiencing things where I wouldn't close windows. Yeah, so I wouldn't close windows. I wouldn't lock doors on toilets. So John would have to come with me in restaurants and stand by the door because I wouldn't lock it. Like on the train, I wouldn't sit by a window because someone else would sit there and I'd feel a bit smothered by them. And it was all getting a bit too, I mean, it was started to affect my life. I couldn't go out, like in meetings in work. I wouldn't go in meetings. I work in a government building and a lot of our rooms don't have windows, and I just couldn't go in them. And I got kind of quite poorly in a different way. And yeah, so I had EMDR, and I have to say that along with medication, EMDR for me personally, I found completely life-changing, absolutely life-changing. And I had a wonderful mental health nurse called Gwyneth who supported me, and the psychologist who referred me for it. And I was kind of like a test case. They hadn't done it before. And for me, it was wonderful. And I think just in terms of maintenance, you know, Joe's 10 now, but, you know, I'm on a far different dose, but I'm still on a small amount of antidepressants. And I feel completely like me. But for me, it was a combination of very good medication. And then, yeah, for EMDR for me was kind of the therapy that clicked things into place.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard recently a lot about EMDR and how it helps like a lot of different conditions, depression and OCD as well, but it's like often used for trauma responses. I was going to ask, so you started taking these different medications and meeting up with your psychiatrist. How long were you in the mother and baby unit for?
So this is something that I always forget, and I say to John, how long was I there? And he's like, oh God, I don't remember, because I had some home leave, you know, and someone was at home, and then in the middle of the night I'd go back because I wasn't doing very well. I think for a few weeks. The average stay is 6 weeks, so I think I was for a few weeks I was there. And then I had some home leave where I was going a bit back and forth because I wasn't comfortable at home and I wanted to be back in the unit. And then I went home for a day, maybe this was on week 4 or something, and I realised I was staying at home. And so I had a community psychiatrist nurse come and see me every day for a couple of hours, who'd sit with me and talk with me, just me and her and the baby in the room. Yeah, and then I think we stayed in where we were until Joe was probably around 4.5 months old. I always get a bit muddled on the timings, but yes, I think I was probably in hospital for maybe 3 weeks, and then I had some time at home mixed in. But then, yeah, kind of at home at my parents-in-law with a kind of psychiatric nurse coming to see me for a large part of the day.
So what's the prognosis for postpartum psychosis? Like, what's the usual recovery time and everything else that happens with it? Do you know?
Yeah, so I mean, you read things, I read lots of research and things, and actually, some research says that the psychosis symptoms can clear very quickly, with medication, but you're left with kind of residual trauma from what on earth has happened to you. Of course, you remember all your hallucinations and things, which can be very, very distressing. But it does vary, so we have a great charity here in the UK who actually I would suggest people look up online anyway, because there's such a brilliant source of information called Action on Postpartum Psychosis, because, and it shares lots of women's experiences, including mine. And of course, they all vary so much. So the prognosis is, you will get better. So some women I've met, it's cleared very quickly, within a month of starting medication, the hallucinations and the mania and things really calm down. But for some, it takes a little more time. And of course, we say, I was reading something the other day where, a woman thought she might be having the kind of late onset postpartum psychosis because it does normally hit within the first few weeks. But the prognosis is that you will recover, but you need, it's a psychiatric emergency, and that's the kind of thing that we try and really push here. That it's not it's not solved by, you know, some nice self-care things that I would do now if I was feeling overwhelmed. Take some day off work, take a mental health day from work, something like that, which you need to keep like your well-being. It's a psychiatric emergency, you know, which can have very devastating outcomes, you know, if not looked after properly. Because, you know, I was left with terrible trauma after it, awful. That's why I had the EMDR. But the prognosis is you will recover. Some people do recover fairly quickly, but some people it takes them a little longer. You know, I know some people have been in mother and baby and it's for 6 months, and I've known some people that have, you know, have been in them a couple of weeks and actually they've received care at home via like a community psychiatry nurse, and that's been better for them. But yeah, definitely within the kind of within the, you know, the postpartum year.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Because there's only, well, in the United States, anyways, there seems to be a lot less postpartum mental health alliances and groups, and we don't know anything about postpartum psychosis here. Like, I remember one of my main obsessions with my second child, because I have OCD, and with both kids I had postpartum OCD, so my symptoms got much worse. But with Elena, my daughter, I was having similar, well, not similar experiences because I did not have postpartum psychosis, but I was having the same, like, I was looking at things and not that they were distorted, but I didn't know if they were distorted or not. So like there was intense doubt around that. And I was so scared that I had postpartum psychosis, because in my mind, all I could think was, well, if I have postpartum psychosis, then I don't know what I'll do. I'll kill someone or do something terrible, right? Because that's the only stories or versions we hear about it. It's probably why the woman was so scared for your story to be in EastEnders, because the last thing anyone wants to see is a killed baby. I'm so thankful for you, because it's such a learning opportunity and like a teachable moment. And you're so brave and vulnerable for sharing something that I'm sure, it was like extremely hard and difficult to go through.
Oh, thank you. But I feel the same about you, you know, because I kind of feel like you're right. You have these symptom lists, don't you? You know, where you kind of go down. I was like checking things of what was I suffering from? Did I have this? Did I have that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and in the end, you want, you know, in the end, you just want to be treated and you want to get better, you know. And so there is that thing. And I was kind of, someone diagnosed me as, you know, as postpartum psychosis when I was first assessed before I went to mother and baby unit, and then one doctor said they didn't think it was that, you know. And then I got some of my notes, it was, you know, extreme generalized anxiety disorder with some sensory hallucinations, you know. And actually on my doctor's notes now, I was there before COVID, I think my son had slap cheek, and you know, I was kind of up on the system, you know, and it said postnatal depression, you know. And of course every time I have a med review, you know, they're like, oh, you have postnatal depression, why are you on meds now? And I have to go through the whole shenanigans all over again about why I'm on the med that I'm on. You know. And it's kind of there is these, you're right, there's these kind of like, you know, putting things into boxes and all those kind of things. And you're right, I definitely, I've been on and I've seen TV shows here in the UK, and I talk about this often on Instagram, you know, where I'm very anti TV shows putting some kind of thing out saying, hi, have you had postnatal depression or psychosis? You know, do you want to appear on blah blah show? You'll get a $50 voucher, £50 voucher if you do. You know, and the woman goes in and talks about what she's going through, not that she's recovered from it, she's going through, and then they kind of go, thanks for that, bye, you know, there's your free taxi home. And I think no, you know, no. And as she's talking, there was like some salacious thing, like I had visions of, you know, killing my baby, I wanted to drown my baby. I'm like, actually, you know, that's not what happened. But you're right, that's what we learn, Windsor, that's what we hear. You're exact, that's, you know, what that doctor said to me, or she, you know, Stacey's not going to kill the baby. You know, I remember my mum saying to me, you're not suicidal, are you? And, you know, actually, you know, I did get suicidal, but it's the kind of what you hear about or what you know, and you're putting it together. And actually, I guess that's what I was getting from doctors as well. They didn't have a rounded kind of story about what was wrong with me. They just said what they'd learned. Some of them hadn't learned about it. you know, and so were kind of talking to me about another illness that they thought I might have because they'd learnt about it. And then there are others who'd seen on the front of, you know, these magazines you see when you go to the supermarket with these headlines like this.
Like, mom,
because
put
we
the
get it.
baby in the microwave, and you're like, what? Why? Why are you telling everyone about that without any context?
There's no context. And, you know, I also feel like, you know, you hear these devastating stories where, you know, a baby's been found on its own somewhere, you know, and we have absolutely no idea at all, you know, about why it's happened or who's put it there, or that, you know, the mental health of the mother. And some people can write some absolutely desperately awful comments on the internet, you know, and I always say, you know, we don't know what was happening. I have no problem saying there was one time I was with the buggy, with the pushchair, and, you know, I remember thinking I could just leave the stroller here and walk off. I didn't, but, you know, I remember thinking I could do that. And, you know, I don't think people will say like, oh, that person didn't deserve to have babies, and there's women all over the world who want babies and they've just left this next to a bin. And you're like, well, I'm sure it wasn't done easily. You know, I'm sure maybe the mum wasn't very well. You know, she's also a woman. She's not just a mum, and she might have been grieving for this life she used to have, and become some utterly consumed with what was wrong with her that she can't think straight. You know, so I think you're right. I think the salaciousness is kind of is propaganda almost in a way, and it's like, yeah, the microwave stories, you know, and that's why I do think sometimes then women are missed. You know, we talk about these women who kind of fall through the gaps of help, and I think sometimes it is with these women missed. We look out for the stories where we're called bonkers or nuts or those kind of things. Yeah. You know, actually they're not talking about, this is a real person who's going through something that's really awful, and there's a baby there as well, you know, he needs to be looked after all in the midst of it, and the mum needs to be looked after, you know, the woman needs to be looked after as well, which I think is very often forgotten when you do see these kind of microwave type stories. Yeah.
Well, I think it's great what you're doing with the Perinatal Mental Health Partnership. I think it's something that's truly lacking here, which is, I mean, becoming more obvious because most of the advocates that I even talk to are all in the UK. So, I mean, I think there's a few here, but I would like to, you know, find out about more organizations here and what actionable steps they're taking. It seems like you guys are doing a lot.
Yeah, I think I think we've kickstarted something, you know, and I think, you know, people are talking, it's not just, you know, we use the word postnatal, not postpartum here. So for years it's been postnatal depression. You know, now people are using the word perinatal a lot more. You know, we're talking perinatal as encompassing all the different illnesses that can affect you with their various different symptoms. You know, and I think a lot of the work is being led by experts by experience. And I think that's incredibly important. You know, and I think I've definitely learned, you know, we learned from the Australian awareness campaign, you know, I talked to Cindy and everyone in the US campaign. But I do think we've kickstarted something here, and I think it's got such momentum because it's so necessary, you know, and I keep, you know, I always worry that the message is going to get lost at some point, that we don't forget about the mums, that we don't forget about the women, because I think there's, you know, there's some research where there was something like, you're 33% more likely, a woman is 33% more likely to go into psychiatric care in the first year after having a baby, you know, if she's ever going to go into one. You know, like maternal death, the leading cause of maternal death is suicide, you know, and they are very sobering statistics. And I think that's why it's so important to listen to the voice of women like ourselves, and for us to create organisations like ours. You know, we're completely not for profit. We've got no money. You know, we're not a charity or anything. We do this around our day jobs, around our family, but it's a huge passion of ours. Because I think the one thing I say this with Beth, Beth's such a great advocate. You know, we will never forget what the feeling was like of being unwell, and it really pains me to know that, you know, there are women across the UK and the US now and everywhere else that are feeling like this. And I think whatever we can do to not just shine a light on it, but actually practical things like we talked about earlier to help recovery start in some way, is the kind of thing that I think we need to keep focusing on as women who've experienced it, and that we need to keep pushing that our voices, you know, are heard. We're not just here to tell our stories, we're here to be listened to, so we can create change, so those women don't fall through the gaps, you know, that those women aren't forgotten about, that no woman has to travel 200 miles with her family, you know, that women who want to have more children end up not having them because they're so scared. You know, I feel like I don't want women having their choices taken away from them because they're so scared of going through something again. We need to do whatever we can to inform healthcare professionals, inform employers, all these kind of things about how to support women and mothers on their journey to recovery.
Wow, you just inspired me so much with that long list of things to do. I'm already like, okay, who am I going to call here in the United States? What are we going to do?
Oh, but Windsor, I have some great friends from when Postpartum Progress was was up and running. I connected with a.
What happened to that? It seems to have stopped.
Yeah, I mean, I would look up and do some reading around it. Yeah, it was dissolved a few years ago in difficult circumstances. But from that, there's some women I met from that organisation who I run a peer support group online, and we some of them run state-based support groups on Facebook as well. So I can put you in contact with some of those women who are huge advocates for maternal mental health, and because I think they are open and willing to talk about their experience. And of course, a lot of them are training in things now as well. They're getting some qualification, some of counsellors. And of course the American system is different to the British system. We've got an NHS here, a National Health Service, and so there are some differences we have to negotiate, but I definitely still reach out to my US friends to kind of gain their insight into things. Like I'm on some maternal mental health professional groups on Facebook as well, where I share some UK resources to say, you won't be able to access these things, but the information is still completely valid to you. Stuff like meds and breastfeeding and all those kind of things. I kind of feel like we've got some good stuff here in the UK that we can share. And also I can point you to kind of maybe some advocates in the US and beyond that it might be good for you to link up with.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, because Postpartum Progress was really good. That was one of the first websites that I found that I felt had accurately described my symptoms and what I was going through. And I was sad to see that it hadn't been updated for like a really, really long time. But all the information there is still super valid.
Yeah, so it was dissolved, but there's lots. I wrote a couple of blogs on the site. I wrote one about friendship throughout a postpartum illness and things. But yeah, there's some great stuff on there. But Postpartum Support International as well have some good information. But yeah, there's lots. I mean, I still remember one of the things that I found most powerful was I think it was when I'd come out of the unit, and it was an Australian website, and I just so wish I'd remembered the name of it. But it had, when you opened up their page, it had video stills of women. There was about 50 on each page who were standing facing the camera doing a 30-second kind of blurb each about their experience. And I found it so powerful. It was the first time ever that I suddenly thought, I'm not alone. These are my people. These are my people.
Yeah.
That I was like actual people talking. I found, I mean, I can't even explain to know that I wasn't on my own, because I mean, even though I was in a unit with women, I was so me. I didn't speak to anybody. I didn't know what they were going through. There was a woman who had psychosis in pregnancy who never left her room, in the room next to me. There was all kinds of different things in there. But actually seeing that website, I found that incredibly powerful. And I so wish I remembered it now, but that was the first time for me when I was a bit like, oh, people sharing their experience is really powerful. We need to listen. And I don't feel as alone.
Well, I'm glad you found that, and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, and I'm glad to be talking to you now. You seem like you're doing great. You always look like you're having so much fun. Before we are done, well, I think we've covered so much, but just one last thing before we close. What advice do you have to any woman or partner who feels like they may be experiencing symptoms of postpartum psychosis?
Oh, so if you feel like you are, or if you're a family member, who is concerned, or a friend or anything like that, for me, the most important thing is that you engage with a healthcare professional, even if you feel like you're thinking things which are scaring you. Sometimes people have sexual thoughts and things, and that terrifies them. Even if you feel scared, it won't be the first time that they've heard someone say this, you know. And I think what I'd say is the first thing is you will get better from this, but in order to get better, you've got to reach out and you've got to be open about your symptoms, because if you're open, you can then get the right treatment plan. Because there's some medications that can help certain symptoms and things, you know. So here in the UK, they're called the SMAR group that produce like a online thing you can print off or you can fill in online, where you can write down your symptoms if you find it really scary to verbalize them. You know, so if you're finding it hard to say, like, because I was really scared of Joe, I found it quite difficult to say that to people, actually, that I didn't think I liked my baby and that I wanted him adopted, because when I had said it to one doctor, they'd kind of recoiled in horror, you know, and disgust. And so being able to fill this in, and what we've been saying to people now is, you know, fill it in, make an appointment with a doctor. We're having lots of e-consultations here in the UK, and email it to the doctor's surgery before you speak to them, and so they've got it, you know. So reach out, or if you're a family member, do that. Speak to a healthcare professional is the very first thing to do, to not be embarrassed or worried about anything you're going to say, and also to be open to treatment options. Because I remember when I first was told to go on the first antidepressants, you know, a family member was saying, you don't want to go on them, you want to go on some herbal thing. That wasn't right for me. And I think if you feel you're unwell or someone around you is unwell, you have to accept that you have to maybe open yourself up to different treatment plans, and to not hold back symptoms from when you're telling a healthcare professional, because as soon as they have the whole kind of information, they can start treating you. And I think I see that with some of the women that I support. They'll say, oh, I'm doing good with this, but I've never told my doctor about this, and I'm really struggling with it. And sometimes their child is 3 and they've never dealt with that particular thing. You know, if they open up, we can start some kind of treatment around it. So I'd say, don't be ashamed. It's not okay you feel like this. But the thing I always say to them is that you deserve help, and that is genuine. You deserve to not feel like this, and not just your baby. Lots of people say, you know, baby needs mummy. Of course, baby needs mummy, but mummy is also a woman. You know, you're Windsor, I'm Eve. You know, you deserve this help. You deserve to feel okay. So be brave, be open, write down your feelings, and get your partner, your friend, or something to give it to a doctor if you want to. But to just try and speak up about what it is that you're going through, because you will get better, but doing that will start that recovery process. I say, even when you go to that doctor on the first day, you might feel awful for the next 5 months, but that is kick-starting your recovery at that point there.
Right? The sooner you ask for help, the sooner you can receive it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Eve. I think we've learned a lot from this chat. I know I have. And hopefully we get to talk soon. Everyone, we're going to end this episode of Maternal Minds, and we'll be back next week. Thank you.